When Pat asked me if I would like to talk today, I said I would be glad to. So I wrote a speech, but before I tell you my speech, I got to tell you a story that my mother told me yesterday. Years ago, my grandmother passed away, and my parents went to Ohio to go to the funeral. They stayed in her house where my Uncle Gerald now lives, and my Uncle Doyle, who lives in New Mexico, traveled in an RV and also stayed at the house. While they were there, my Uncle Doyle asked my Uncle Gerald if there was a place locally that would take care of his sewage system in the RV. My Uncle Gerald said no. My mom said, yes, there is. I know of a place, Red Owens. So she called him up and asked Mr. Owen if they could come over and take care of their sewage. And he said, bring the RV over. So my dad and Uncle Doyle took the RV over to Mr. Owen's place, took care of the sewage, and Mr. Owen asked my dad what he was in Ohio for. And he said he was there for his mother's funeral. Well, he looked at the two and said, well, you two need a haircut. So he gave him a haircut, and he now said, now you're going to be presentable for your mother's funeral. Little did he know they had already gone to this funeral. I hope I'm presentable here enough for his funeral. Claire Bauer Owen. As to most of his friends, he was known as CB or Red, but to me, he was known as Mr. Owen. I am truly humbled to be here today to celebrate the life of my dear friend. My family and I have known Mr. Owen for 50 years. When I was 2 years old, my parents, Bill and Marjorie Munnerlin, packed up the family and moved us to Milford Center, Ohio, where they rented a place for Mr. Owen and his wife, Vanessa, and they became very close friends. Even though I set fire to the two-story duplex, which did a lot of damage to the lower half of the building, we still remained friends. When I was 13 years old, my parents moved the family back to Missouri, but would go to Ohio often to visit family and friends. Mr. and Mrs. Owen always opened up their house, even if they weren't there, to allow the Munnerlins a place to stay. After I joined the Air Force and prior to my second duty station, Incirlik Air Base, Turkey, I had to go to Ohio to fly out. Mr. and Mrs. Owen allowed me to stay with them for a few days while waiting on the plane. This is the kind of people that they were. Sometime later, they packed up and moved to Alabama to be with their daughter, Pat, who was also my babysitter, and her husband, John. And they always told my parents to come visit anytime they wanted, that the lights would always be on and the beds would always be made. I cannot remember a time where my parents and I would stop by and visit Mr. Owen on the way to visit my sister and her family, who also live in Alabama. I remember the stories, and I enjoyed the stories that Mr. Owen would tell me about his childhood and where he worked, and the struggles that he endured to become the man that he is today. A wonderful, caring, loving man, husband, father, uncle, grandfather, great-grandfather, great-great-grandfather, and friend. I am truly humbled to have known Mr. Owen. I know he's in a better place, but I would still miss him. Thank you, Mr. Owen, for allowing me to be a part of your life. Thank you.